everyone around is a conventional farmer. So, and on paper, there are many ways of how you could transform. But then it's also, again, the social dimension. If you're the only one, you're the weird one.
Beste luisteraar, een unicum. Na bijna 40 afleveringen gaan we vandaag echt international. Tenminste, als Wilfried Reemans, onze Nederlandstalige Belgische gast van een aantal afleveringen geleden, even buiten beschouwing laten. Niet dat we al door onze duurzame koplopers van Nederlandse bodem heen zijn, zeker niet. Onze Oostenrijkse gast van vandaag zettelt zich juist hier in Nederland en spreekt de taal trouwens heel behoorlijk, maar voelt zich comfortabeler als we het in het Engels doen.
So, let's make the switch. Today's guest works on making agriculture more sustainable, adding her international expertise and knowledge to projects initiated by Wageningen University Research, the WUR. Armed with our translation guide on agriculture, we will dive into the challenges of modern agriculture, the nature-positive alternatives, its capacities to feed the world, and making a living for farmers in the roaring 20s. And of course, a lot more. Very warm welcome to Martina Huber.
Hello.
Hello. That starts in Dutch, but Martina, we'll break the ice with a couple of icebreakers. True or false, right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is for you, Alder.
Okay. First one, true or false? Organic products in the supermarket are unnecessarily expensive.
Oui. In the supermarket, unnecessarily expensive. No. It's no.
Okay. Then we continue. Now you continue in the supermarket with your own shopping habits. So if you had to choose, would you choose an organic cucumber wrapped in plastic or a non-wrapped regular cucumber?
So wrapped would be better. The wrapped organic one.
Okay, that's the one that would be in your shopping basket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, goodie.
Agree or disagree? Modern agriculture is very inefficient. And this is your chance to make a definition of what you think agriculture is, or at least in this podcast.
But agriculture is quite diverse. So agriculture is actually what we as human beings use the land for to feed us and what we eat. So in the sense also the animals that we eat.
Okay.
So that means, and that then has several subsets. And if you also consider what we use the land for, and that would be then also the trees, but that does not fall under agriculture, neither the fish that we fish out of the ocean. But this is a bit, diffuse. But if we want to be very strict, that would be the definition. And then under agriculture, there is then animal husbandry, but also then indirectly what we use for feed. So feed is what we give to animals, and food what is for human consumption. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So back to the question.
The question was, is it efficient or inefficient?
Yeah, but there rather the question is where? Like on a global setting or now in the Netherlands?
Let's limit it to the Netherlands then.
Yeah, okay, but that is what the Netherlands always... It's famous for highly efficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
But do you agree? I mean, that's more or less the question.
It is, in terms of efficiency, it's to the max. But we are at the peak. It cannot be
squeezed out anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
We'll definitely come to that later.
Mm-hmm.
Next question. Gen modification for plants or crops. Is it good or not?
For whom?
For us?
As human beings to eat it again.
Yeah.
Like... good is also a difficult term there. I mean, I have to be the scientist again.
Very nuanced.
No, indeed, because good in terms of what? That we have then that could help to have less impact on climate, or good for our health, or good to feed enough people, that it in different ways. But if I try to read in between the lines, it would be rather as the Dutch consumer if GMO, genetically modified organism in that sense, crops or a salad or maize or something. If that is worrying for health, then I can say no.
Not good.
It's not worrying. It's not worrying. It does not make a difference to your health if it is GMO or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is fun because we already see the statements that there's a lot of nuance in it. We talked just before this episode recording it that there are just no And that's true. I think you have to be robust. There are no quick answers in science. So we have to go deep. And we will go deep today. Yeah. But the open question we still have, Alder.
Yeah, that's the open question. So then you can really think about it and give a long answer. What should be absolutely included in government policy from a sustainability perspective?
From a sustainability perspective towards agriculture, that's where I would focus on. That would be, I would wish that it is more long-term, that it's looked longer than one government period. And I think this is really what's lacking, but this is a general issue. And then, because then you end up with things like the nitrogen, like the stickstoff crisis, because it did not happen out of the blue. The data was there before. It was known before, but ignored or just not put on paper. And then from one day to the other, farmers get punished for it.
I sense a bit of a frustration, right? Or
luckily, I'm not a farmer, so otherwise I would have a lot. I can see a lot of frustration there, because the frustration
with scientists. That's that governments don't listen to scientists.
Yeah, I think
in general, or
maybe don't listen is too strong, because you can also not
act upon it. Then
you cannot blame politicians, because you cannot expect that every minister has a degree in the ministry that he or she is working in, and you can also not expect that, let's say, Minister of Agriculture would approach Wageningen University. I have a question here. What can we do there?
Why not? That sounds
true, but then it's also
very logical.
Then it's also a bit biased. I would rather say that as we should also ourselves as researchers see our task in bringing it there, not just sit and wait until it happens, because it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing with climate change. We have, as climate scientists, we have been preaching this since the 60s, that this is going to happen, but nothing happened. And now here we sit. So it's rather and then the what it would mean, the application, that of course it's not the most popular choices that you would have to make, but that's why it needs to be communicated, and the awareness needs to be there, and then people would understand. Yeah. So it's also a lacking of courage, maybe. So I would. That's also what I would like to see: courage in actually really long term
from the government.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Courage. Okay.
Clear.
Can we
Who is Martina Huber?
Yeah, can we start with that question? Who is Martina Huber?
Yeah, no, let's okay.
A scientist, I guess.
Good guess. Yeah, I would say yes, I'm a scientist. I'm Martina Huber. Like I was mentioned already, I come originally from Austria, and this is also where I studied biology. It was general biology, not with a specific focus. So I did my master's there, and then didn't know exactly what to do. So I did a postgraduate internship, it was called at that time, and that happened to be here in the Netherlands, in Utrecht. But that was rather from pragmatic reasons, because Spain and UK didn't respond early enough. So I ended up in the Netherlands. Just a total coincidence. And I was not, this is really disclaimer, I was not interested in plants. I was working on Alzheimer's before, and I never was actually really interested in plants. But then this lab was working on plants. Okay. And I just, so I did my internship there, and I really enjoyed the research atmosphere, how it was there as compared to what I experienced in Austria. And then I also didn't know how this whole PhD system works, and there a PhD position opened up actually, and at the same time another one in Spain again, and I applied for both, but
again?
Once again tried to go to Spain to leave the Netherlands.
This isn't the good start. Netherlands, and then you have this weather outside, and I could have had some sun. But, and again, it was the plants. Actually, the other one would have been something else. So I was not highly interested in the topic, but I really liked the research atmosphere. And I must say, I took... my PhD research one was on sustainable rice farming, focused on Southeast Asia, where there's really this traditional rice farming still with transplanting rice in the paddy fields to make that more sustainable.
And that holds sun. Southeast Asia. There's a little bit of sun over there. So
indeed, and I got to go to the Philippines actually. So I had my field work. I was actually doing my field work on the Philippines, and I must say I grew a lot into the topic. I really enjoyed it, and the more I was working in it, the more I saw actually sense in it, and that you could really do something, like really move something. And especially being there in the Philippines, you go there with a research question and you are there to carry out your field experiments, to collect your data that you can go back and do your analysis. And then you stand there in the fields with the rice farmers and with the contract workers actually that just live outside the research institute in the slums, and you talk to them and then you feel like, wow, but this is so big, this is so complex. And then here I am just trying to answer my research question, what's the most bushy rice plant? I put now in very simple. But that there's so much more to it and this whole social dimension. And I think this is really, there were some experiences that I had before that brought me on that line, but they are really so, okay, I for myself at least don't see the typical scientific path of academia that you just climb the ladder and you publish papers and this, but
can you explain what is it that you saw that really struck you in the Philippines? What is it that really opened your eyes and say, hey, oh my, does it work like this or can we make it better?
Yeah, many things actually also. So where I was, it was the International Rice Research Institute. So it's really the center of, there are several institutes in all over the globe actually. But the center is in the Philippines. And then first of all, seeing how much manual labor this is, that they really by hand transplant the rice plants, and the same for harvesting. And it's the same phenomenon that is happening everywhere, that people don't want to farm anymore. Not just because it's not popular, but they can literally not survive on it, and move to the cities. So there's literally lack of labor. And then in addition I need to explain a bit more maybe, that the traditional rice farming, how it is in the paddy fields with the standing water, this is now, fun fact, this is not because the rice needs this water. This is for hundreds and hundreds of years a natural way to prevent weeds from growing, because no plant can actually grow underwater or germinate underwater, and neither can the rice. So that's why first they have the seedlings outside and then they need to transplant them into these paddy fields. Yeah. So the rice has a double advantage. It's already a plant, and second, the water prevents other plants from growing. Oh. And this worked for hundreds and hundreds of years. But now with climate change, the weather becomes much less predictable. So the planting times are less predictable. And then if there are no rainfalls, the fields will be dry and the weeds are coming. Yeah. Okay. And then what they do is spray herbicides. And spray lots of herbicides because they were not used to it. They cannot read instructions because they cannot read, and then they don't protect themselves. So it goes into groundwater. So it has really strong effects. And this is exactly what I was working on, to find actually rice varieties that can compete against the weeds. So you would have much less weeds and you would need much less herbicides, preferably none. And they are really so, wow, but you can really make an impact there. And you really see these people, how deep rice is everything. Rice farming is really their life. They eat rice 5 times a day. And this is not exaggerated. This is really the case.
Yeah. And so you're a rice expert then?
I'm a rice expert.
At a certain point.
Yeah.
Okay, but then you got your PhD.
So I'm still actually introducing myself. So so I finished my exactly. So I came back to the no, it's good. But then I answer your question with this. So actually, I came back to the Netherlands and I did my analysis and I defended my PhD in Utrecht. And then it was clear for me. Okay, I don't see my future as in that. No, in the Netherlands, probably because I was the only rice farmer here, but not in the traditional academic pathway. So I thought I really feel similar again with climate change. We have been preaching about this, and we have the knowledge there at the university. But if I write a paper about it, that will not help the farmers there.
You want to put it into practice.
Exactly. It's
Met
the point of bringing
it. That's what we say in the Netherlands. Met je voeten in de klei.
Precies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really felt like it needs to get out. Yeah. And so I decided for myself, I will leave university, but then I must say my current mentor, Eric Schranz, he convinced me to go to Wageningen and to work with him in this project. And he promised me I don't need to write papers, but it is really about, and we will probably talk about this more, about actually really applying the knowledge, and that was then not particularly about rice, but tropical crops, and to really make it tangible and to see what that would mean for society, and really, really more the applied side and not there and collecting data.
Have you ever considered, starting your own farm here at a small scale, as you know so much about crops? And you add, if the option is, I want to be pragmatic and I want to experiment and I don't want to write papers, let's just do it myself.
Yes, I absolutely thought about it a lot, and it becomes more and more concrete in the sense in my head. But then there we are again with the setting of the Netherlands. And like I said, that I'm coming from Austria, and I'm really from a very tiny village in the middle of the mountains where there are it's basically farmers and there's nothing else, and all the rest needs to leave the village to go to work. And there I would be much more confident in doing it there, because I know the climate, I know the crops that grow and how you would have to do it, and with the seasons. And it is also relatively easy to get land, because also there farmers stop and the next generation doesn't do it. But here it's not impossible, but very hard to get land. And this is actually one of the interventions that I must say that the government did start in buying farmers out of their trap, basically, and splitting it, because the farms are enormously big here. I mean, it was always, to my Dutch colleagues, it was always, if you only notice, this is normal. But I really know farmers that have 7 cows, and this was my normal. And then you see these machines here, really. So actually to get farmers out of this trap and split it up and then redistribute the land. But it's not affordable. If you are, I don't know, a couple where one is a nurse and the other one is a teacher, and you want to start a farm, it's not possible. No.
But you really are considering to go back to Austria one day and then...
Yes, I am. And preferably, I would really want to have farming actually as part of my life. But like I said, it's in practice. So there is this concept, it's called farming plus X. That would mean, and X is whatever other job. It can also be working at the bank. That you, 4 days a week, you have your normal job, but the other time you are farmer. And that would then, in practice, what would it mean? I live in Utrecht now, that you are, I don't know, you have some land in the Bild, and then you work at Utrecht University the other time, but you need to be at your land. So you cannot be in the city, and I know a Volkstown for me is not fulfilling, because I want to be there.
Are you saying it's a stretch then? So the farm plus X, that it's maybe a too big stretch to really combine it, because having land and the responsibility of taking care of it and nurturing it and growing stuff, it's difficult to combine with a regular job.
No, I think it is definitely combinable, because it very much depends on the case and on what that job is, what that X is. And then of course on your family setting and a lot of other things. Yeah. The thing is that I would really like to do farming, but what I also have to say is I would not like to depend on the financial outcome of it.
Yeah. So rather farming for self-sufficiency maybe, or small scale to support yourself and your family.
And to show that it can be done different. And literally, like you said, to try it myself, you know, not just theoretically talk about it, but really doing it myself as a farmer. Yeah.
So we're talking about self-sufficiency farming, and we started off with one of the statements about efficiency in Dutch agriculture. Maybe that's we can use that as a bridge here. So what is your view on the Dutch agricultural system? So then specifically looking at mostly looking at crops, So making use of land to grow food and feed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so in terms of, if you say efficiency in terms of what you get out per square meter, then it's highly efficient what is done here, because also it's just incredibly mechanized. So there's basically no handwork, but very little manual labor. And the machines, they are so specific to make very specific machines to enormously big machines that just the whole aim of it is that you need that one person can do the maximum possible. And that's why you have one farmer couple and the area they farm is so big. I mean, you can also look up numbers, how much more the farms grew, but the number of farmers stayed the same. Mm-hmm. And that's why, even though they have all these machines that make it much more time efficient also, still they work from morning to evening, just because in order to survive and in order to still make a living, you need to grow bigger. And this is exactly this rat race. You need to grow bigger to still get something out of it, because you need to stay competitive, because prices are so low for your actual produce that can even be milk from cows. So you need to get a loan, and in order to pay the loan, you need to grow bigger. So this is the trap. It's exactly the trap. Yeah, so I think it is highly efficient, and that's why I cannot... Probably there are ways, and people are still trying to make it more efficient. But in terms of what yield do you get out of a certain area is really incredible here at the moment. Yeah.
But the problem is then what you're saying is that prices are low and continue to be low. Even so there's the rat race between production, which has to grow in order to make a living. But can you link a little bit on what are the implications of that? So I think we all heard about soil extraction or the poorness of the soil, because we ask so much from land, and it taps into a lot of challenges that we have from a climate or biodiversity perspective. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. Okay, so to explain a bit more specific how akkerbouw in that case now is done in the Netherlands, it's basically monoculture. And monoculture means you have one, also crop, maybe I should define what a crop is. Crop is anything you as a farmer really want to have grown in your field. So weeds is the ones that you don't want to have, and a crop is what you actually harvest and want to have. And this can be wheat, this can be maize, this can be sugar beet, this can be potato, whatever. So in order to make it as most efficient as possible, you have a monoculture, and this in the biggest area as possible, because then it's all the same. You can use one machine for all of it. So this is also what happened. So you have, and in addition, it's the best if the field is square, and this is exactly what you see. And you go by train, and you have only squared fields.
But
and
not
also,
in the long term, right? I mean, because it makes the soil.
Oh yeah, there we still get, but that has nothing to do with square or not.
Squareness.
No, I understand, but
yeah,
it has something to do with the disadvantages of monoculture.
Oh yeah. So this is where I'm getting. So just as the setting, what monoculture means, because I don't know if everyone knows this. Yeah. So you have monoculture, and you have it in very big area. So yeah. So that is the point is that you have one plant on it, and let's just take maize, because this is what's grown the most here. And
corn.
Corn. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so the corn is also, I learned this is what you eat, but the plant is called maize.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good nuance again.
Yeah, but yeah, it's so that we talk about the same thing. Exactly. So and maize is actually known for how demanding it is in terms of nitrogen actually and phosphorus. So you need to fertilize maize a lot. So that's one thing, and then it extracts. But there can be any other plant also. If it's only one plant, it only takes out what that plant needs. So it extracts the soil from a very one dimension, let's say.
Yeah.
And then if you continuously plant only that plant, then you reach an end. So, and that happens, and that's why we add a lot of fertilizer. Yeah. And then in addition, what it is that so they are all in this monoculture. So you also need to spray a lot, because there's nothing that could balance it out. So you need to spray pesticides, and pesticides are the ones that go against insects, and herbicides that go against weeds.
Yeah. Will the dependency on these grow? I mean,
yeah,
the longer you use it, that you need more of it.
So the thing is, it's how should I say? It's again, I need to redefine the question a bit, I think. Yeah. No, so will you depend more? The thing is that what we are breeding for, or the varieties that we have at the moment, so the let's say maize again, and then so the crop species is maize, but then you can have a lot of varieties theoretically. But we only use a very few that are the most in yield. But to get this yield, these varieties are bred to that level of nitrogen, that level of phosphorus, and they have very low intrinsic defense against diseases because they invest everything in yield. So they are dependent on being pampered. So yes, you get more dependent in the system how we have it right now.
Yeah, but I mean over time. I mean, if you pamper with an X.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you stick with this, and there is nothing else that could balance it other than what you need to add to it.
Okay.
So they do have the varieties that we are growing at the moment. They are the super high yielding ones because this is what they're bred for. But under what circumstances? And these are the perfect circumstances. So if there is then a week of drought, they cannot handle it because they invest. I mean, a plant is like human beings. You have an immune system, but if you're stressed in another way, that you have a lack of sleep or you are.
So in essence, it's a very poor plant, which has a very little strength itself, which we have to add externally in order for it to grow as fast as possible. And that also harms soil.
Yeah, it does not harm soil per se because it is in the soil. But the issue is the imbalance of it because we only throw these three things on the soil. And it's plants take up a certain amount, but another amount not, and that then leaks into the groundwater. So it's really the imbalance, and then also with probably what you are hinting at is at the microorganisms that live there. It's just out of balance. It's like if you take an overdose of vitamin C. In principle, vitamin C is good, but it's about the balance.
All right.
So overall, there are a lot of disadvantages to monoculture.
So again, we didn't actually get to this.
No, I was asking, where does it lead to? I mean,
exactly. So now we have the setting clear. What does it lead to? First of all, loss of biodiversity. I think that already becomes clear because if we only grow one plant, then there's maybe one insect that is perfect for this plant and the rest is just not there. So you lose a lot of biodiversity above ground, below ground, but also around it. Because if you... maybe we can go to it later. Anyway, it's biodiversity loss and then soil degradation. So it's also the draining of this. So also with this setting of the square fields, this is what I was hinting at before. So in principle, the squaredness is not an issue, but why the fields are all squared is because here in the Netherlands, you need to drain the soil to actually grow maize, for example. Maize is really not made for this soil. Maize really doesn't like it wet. It does not like to have wet feet. So what you do is you drain the fields to make it drier. And then even more dry than for other crops would be necessary. But in order to grow maize, you need to make it really dry. And so you have all these ditches. But that what then means if the rainfall comes, actually, because the rain falls and then it drains, so it carries all the nutrients with it, where otherwise it would stay there. So this is another thing that happens. And then it goes into the groundwater. Then we have the nitrogen crisis that we already touched upon.
Because water quality, it endangers the water quality then of also. And it's because the thing is also with the fertilization, it's just over-fertilized. So actually, this is also something where I first thought this is just appears to my eye, but actually it is like this, that when I compared the greenness of the grass to what I was used to from home, and here it's a completely other green. It's a very turquoise-ish green almost. And this is, actually I looked it up then, and it's just complete over-fertilization. It gets this if you would do Photoshop, it's this oversaturated green. In the Netherlands, you mean, compared to Austria?
Yeah, it is. In addition to that, it is one type of grass only because the Holstein, like the black-white cow, can only eat this grass. The rest they cannot digest. But these poor cows are bred to not being able to digest anything else. So it needs to be exactly this grass, and this grass is completely over-fertilized.
And that's completely tied together then, because if you say the cow can only eat this grass and we only feed it this grass, and then you kind of keep something in place which is very dependent on each other. And if you just change one tiny bit, then the whole ecosystem collapses. This
is a perfect example, actually, because if we would say, as plant scientists, you need to increase diversity in the field, then in the grass that you have clover there, clover is a legume, and legumes are the plants that actually can fix nitrogen in the ground. These are the only plant family that can actually do this. And this is another thing that is really lacking in the Netherlands. right now that there's no legume, actually, no major legume. It's mostly the few grains and then potato and then other things. But there's no actual legume in the whole system. No, but all of it is imported because we feed it to animals, again, mostly. We also eat it, but that's marginal. But then clover, you could add it, and it would also be green manure, actually. But then the cows cannot eat it. I mean, they get bloated and diarrhea, and they then don't give enough milk, and they're just suffering. So you cannot do this.
But they were bred like that because
they are bred like this.
The Milka Alpenkoe, I mean, she eats everything, right?
That one for sure. That's also why she got probably purple. But also the cows that I know at home, I mean, they're literally just there in the mountains and they eat what's there.
Yeah.
And even these are 200 different species. And that's what makes them healthy. And also the poor Holstein cow,
But things in Austria have developed as well, right? I mean, it's a bit of a romantic
no, so the thing
of Austria.
Is, actually, if my uncle would hear me talking here, so they are not at all proud about this, right? The funny or not actually funny thing is that they look at the Netherlands or northern Germany. This is, where we want to go to. This is they advanced.
Of
oh yeah, because everything is so efficient, and this is where they are aiming at in theory. But then it's funny for me, or like just a realization for me that here I see now that we are here, everything is suffering for this extreme efficiency, and that we really see, okay, we need to go down from this. And then over there, I see that they think, okay, we are living behind the mountain, even under a rock, and we are doing it like, yeah. But and this is really the mountainous area of Austria. And in the flatter part, in the east, it's also bigger, but not to this extent. But I also have an uncle doing farming there. But then what it is actually in the mountains is that just the mountains prevented this from happening. Otherwise we would sit maybe in the same situation as here. Yeah. But it's just because of the mountain. It's not possible. You cannot go on there with a machine, and you can just not do this.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe back to your, because you mentioned in the beginning of farmers, you said, well, if I were a farmer, I would be really angry and frustrated with everything that's being thrown at us, with the whole nitrogen dilemma problem that we have currently. On the other hand, I also hear some criticism from your side on the current agricultural approach that we apply, so monoculture and a lot of fertilizers. What is your sympathy with the farmers in the Netherlands?
Yeah, so I think really what I also learned with my work in Wageningen is also this misconception that is not, the farmer doesn't do this because they think this is the best. This is, I really think it is mostly because there's just no other way, or at least for most of them, there's no other way visible. So you do this because you're forced into the system because of million historical reasons, where also banks played a role. But then also it's only imagine, so I was also visiting one biodynamic farmer in Zeeland, but then it's just also the whole structure. So everyone around is a conventional farmer. So, and on paper, there are many ways of how you could transform, but then it's also, again, the social dimension. If you're the only one, you're the weird one.
Maybe making the bridge to your work, because you're working on solutions that could help farmers potentially going forward at the work. Can you explain a little bit? You mentioned it briefly, exotic plants, no rice, but what are the things that you're working on?
So the bigger project in what we are working on in Wageningen, in the project I'm part of, is increasing biodiversity for the Dutch food system. And this is different subsets. So the first one is the production, really. And the second one is post-harvesting and processing. And the third one is then really supermarket consumer side.
And what's the higher objective then? To make it less dependent?
To bring more diversity, because less diversity is, and maybe... Should I elaborate on this now? What are the drawbacks of less diversity?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I guess in the production side, we actually covered it quite a lot already now, what monoculture does. Yeah. But then in general, also if you you are so dependent on the market, on the global market, because you focus yourself on a few things that you produce, and then you make yourself very vulnerable because all the rest you need to import. So you are very strongly dependent on the market to what you want to bring in, but also what you need to export. So that is one thing. But on the other hand, you also, it strongly shapes what you're doing. So if prices fall and rise, you need to adapt to it. So what happens if maize prices really drop a lot? Yeah. And then in addition, you are very vulnerable to climate change also. Because, I mean, it's the basic thing is you don't put all eggs in one basket. But this is what's the situation at the moment.
That's what we talked about with Ami as well. Eh? The previous episode on complex systems or complexity theory. With the Cavendish bananas, where it's just one type of banana, which seems a very solid market, but then actually it's very vulnerable, as you were saying, for maize as well.
Yeah. In general, I mean, maize. I just take maize as an example. Mm-hmm. But in general, there are maybe 5 actual crops that count in the Netherlands at the moment. But this is nothing. I mean, you're so vulnerable. Yeah.
What are the 5 biggest ones in the Netherlands?
I would also have to check the numbers, but certainly it is the maize, and then it is also potato and wheat a lot. So potato is a bit further down, but maize and wheat are the 2 biggest. And again, I'm talking about crops, but then a lot is grass, basically to feed animals. Yeah.
Okay, but you were telling about your project. Sorry to
interrupt. Correct. Yes. Yeah. No. So in essence, it's to bring more diversity, and then for the third part, actually, also what would that mean in a supermarket? You know, if you have, maybe I come back to the first part again. To bring more diversity doesn't mean only. So it means 2 things. First, to increase really diversity in the crops that we grow, and that can be done in different ways. Either you go back to crops that have been grown in the past, but for one or other reason, economically were less interesting, or of other reasons. And
like the 5 shaped colors of carrots. Like the orange carrot,
for example. So what it would mean, not just to increase diversity in the field, but in the whole chain, like seeing it as a food system, also what would mean more diversity in the supermarket, and then also what would that mean for the consumer. But that brings me back to the first part again. So to bring more diversity in the field, that would mean more different varieties of crops. So going either, and there are different ways. So you go back to crops that have been grown in the past, and they're called heritage crops or neglected crops, like really what the grandparents still used to eat, but then...
Postelijn.
Pastinaak ook, ja, precies.
The multiple colored
koolraap of this.
My grandmother always used to postelijn because there was a lot of nutrients, very healthy nutrients.
Yeah, there's also what's called the
I've never seen it before.
Anyways, there are lots.
There are different cabbages, and the thing is also, it's not only that for many, it's really just economic reasons why they have not been grown anymore, but others are also that they are a lot connected to war. When people were poor, then they had to eat this. So you don't want to eat this anymore because it's poor people's food. So it's a lot also this. Besides, many of them would actually be very healthy, but then, it has these associations. So going back again to these crops that are actually super well adapted to the Dutch ground, right? And then we come back to the maize fields. So this is one, but the other one is also to try and bring in new crops, new for the Netherlands, but that are crops somewhere else in the world that would maybe be possible to grow here thanks to climate change in the future. So this was actually then my part, to try semi-tropical crops, to grow them here. And the point was not to grow them in a greenhouse, because greenhouses are already... we don't want to lose sustainability just for the sake of increasing biodiversity. So greenhouses...
but you did construct some tunnels, right? I mean,
exactly. So what I mean with greenhouses is really the heated greenhouses, the glass house, where you can create the perfect environment. You can set all the parameters, but that's really not the point. The point is to try it in the tunnel system. And the tunnel is, you have it's literally just a normal field, and then you put a plastic foil over it, like a half dome shaped, and they call them polytunnels because
that's a form of protection, right?
Yes. It is a form of...
But is the ultimate goal to do it without the tunnel, without the plastic, without the protection?
Sorry?
Is the ultimate goal to do it without the...
for the semi-tropical crops, I think then we are 500 years in climate change, and then probably
we wouldn't want that.
No, wouldn't want that. And it's also, it depends on, just the foil, what it does is actually that it just, it creates a microclimate. It is actually climate, exactly what climate change does. It's this glasshouse effect. It captures the radiation, the sun radiation. And keeps it in there a bit more, and it keeps this humidity trapped in, and this is exactly the tropical conditions. And this is what we wanted to try. Would that actually, but you don't heat anything, right? So it's literally just this thing on top, and what it does is that it extends the season. So you can plant a bit earlier, so already in mid-April, and you can go on until October. And that is then the season, that makes the season long enough actually for the semi-tropical crops. And to give names to it that people can actually envision what this would mean is the famous Kauseband, for example, or where we had 4 different varieties of Kauseband, the purple one, the green one, and then also herbs like the Thai basil, or then we had bittergourd, and so in the Suriname cuisine, this is the sopropo, which is also super healthy, and then kangkong, the water spinach, these things, and it was literally a trial. Would it even work just like this? Because nights are still super cold. It gets cold in the night.
And did you manage to?
Of course, that's a follow-up question. Surprisingly well. Like really, I was really surprised, which is super sad on the one hand, but because we had just a crazy hot summer. And then, so in the beginning, how it was in the past season is in the beginning, it was very warm. So seedlings is established super well. And then it was raining a lot, but that didn't matter because it was still warm. And they were already established. So they kept just growing and formed flowers. And then the next thing was also, someone asked me, did you think about pollination? And I said, I thought about pollination, but I know that it's just with the insects. Yeah, but that the insects in the semi-tropics are probably different ones than here. So what I also did is...
You mean, would a normal Dutch bee want to pollinate the exotic crops?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And would he? Probably not.
So the thing is that often it is how flowers are made. They are actually very much, it's a co-evolution, it's called, that the insect has the shape for the flower and the other way around.
Yeah. There's a mismatch now, probably.
Could be, but I didn't know.
No.
But what I did is also because I didn't know, and my colleagues also didn't know, and the people at Unifarm that we work with also. So I went around, and actually we visited farmers in Enkhuizen. This is also a funny story, actually. So it's a farmer's couple, and he was a potato farmer. And that just got less and less financially interesting. Yeah. And his wife is from Thailand.
Okay.
And they used to go every year to Thailand, and then there was COVID. And then she used to bring back, when they went to Thailand, the vegetables. And then there was COVID and they couldn't go. So actually her relatives from Thailand sent her seeds that she could grow it here herself. And she just tried in a very small side batch, and it worked for herself. And then she did it again next year, and there was even more. And then she via her Facebook network, really, she started selling this stuff. And people from Germany came to buy her bittergourd. So we were there. It's an incredible story now. And now they totally gave up on the potato stuff. So yes, he got convinced. So for him, it was, let her do her stuff, her gardening. So now it's really, they do it still, just sell it via Facebook. Okay. And they expanded a bit. So anyway, we went there, and also just to learn from them to see what people already do. And that's also the part of the project, actually, we got aware that these things are already happening, because this is exactly the Dutch society is so diverse, actually, but it's not, you don't see that represented in the supermarket, but it's also the so many immigrant communities and such a rich diversity in culture, and so people who eat so many different things, but where these crops are bought at the moment is either at the toko or at the open market. Yeah. And this is then where the stuff comes from. It needs to come from far. And then like the tire blood, maybe that some people know, this really comes by plane from Suriname, because it needs to be fresh, and it can only last a few days. that you can actually use it. So it comes by plane. It has an incredible footprint.
Exactly.
And it's also incredibly expensive. And then you can imagine that they do not have maybe the biggest budget, but they are willing to pay this price. And then you see what this means for these people, and the cows are about the same, and it's not the same as spare bone. And then you also see, okay, and how much that means to these people. And in fact, people do try to grow it in their backyard.
But has emotional value.
Absolutely, a lot. If you come from somewhere, you are, and I see this analogy actually with the plants, that you pluck them from their natural habitat and you put them here in the Dutch surrounding, and it's so different, And then again, like we are back to the insects. Would the Dutch bee even hop on my flowers,
Yeah. But it did then.
It did,
or did
actually.
Did you do like artificial pollination?
No, I didn't. But so when I went to Enkhuizen to talk to Nico and Horace, then I asked them, but what did you do? Because the people at Unifarm asked me, but should we order bags of bumblebees? And then, okay, actually they do this. I was not aware that you can order bags of bumblebees to pollinate your greenhouse, but this is what they do. And then you close and let them in, and you don't enter because they would go out. Yeah. And I thought, no, but this goes totally against my sustainability values. Yeah. So what they said, Nico and Horace, but we just leave it open for some time and then insects go in, and it worked. So this is what I did, that in the morning when I came to university, I just went and opened the tunnels, and then it worked. So I don't know which bee or which fly or what wasp it was, but it worked. And I had from all the 50 different crops that I was growing, there were flowers and there were vegetables. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, question on because you said, well, unfortunately, we had a very hot summer.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I mean, that's also what they predict, what scientists predict is going to be the case.
Exactly.
So actually, if it works well in these exceptionally warm summers in the Netherlands, then this is a good thing, at least for your exotical crops.
Yeah.
Or exotic crops. And how does it compare to, you talked about the corn, maize, maize, which does not need wet feed. So where do you see the balance? Are there traditional crops? I also heard the story about, we had very wet soils last couple of months, and there were a lot of potato farmers. The question was, could they even get their potatoes out of the ground in the Zeeuwse klei? So where do you see a potential threat with climate change for Dutch crops versus the uptake from your exotic crops?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the climate scenario is actually what also just from KNMI, what came out is that it will get more wet. The winters will get more wet and the summers will get more warm. So it's in terms of the wetness, I think we should really go to not try to again. Okay, no, I don't want to give recommendations, but I just see it as tricky. Try to what we often think as human beings, we make the setting and we shape the environment to fit then our crop.
Right.
But rather the other way around, to see what crops do it actually under these conditions. And then what we can do at university and what we can add is to make informed decisions. And because, we have the luxury to actually try these things. And if it fails, it fails. But whatever, it's a failed experiment. But as a farmer, you cannot. You cannot just lose your whole harvest. And this is, I think, really something that we could add and do indeed. I mean, as a farmer, you also don't know what grows in Southeast Asia, where they have the climate now that would come here in, 15 years. So this is something really that we could add. And that was part of this project that we really,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what would happen, I mean, if you're experimenting or with more biodiversity, with strokenteelt, so having, I don't know what the English word for that
is. Strip cropping.
Yeah. So having one strip of one type of crop and then another one, more exotic stuff. Whereas we were used to have a very efficient system. Mm-hmm. What does it mean for the future of Dutch agriculture? Does it mean, is this meant for self-sufficiency for the Netherlands? Or even if we swap over to a more diverse type of agriculture with multiple crops and maybe then lower volumes because there's a little bit of economies of scale that might be lost, would it then still be more of a self-sufficiency, or you still feel that we can have an export function as the Netherlands?
Yeah, so I think there are many questions in this one question.
And it was a very long one as well.
Sorry, yeah.
No. I try to come to all the sub-points.
But you get it, the question.
Oh, yeah, I do understand the question. No, so first, I think to also explain the strip cropping. So what it is actually is to break exactly that monoculture that we talked about, the square monoculture. So you can still have your squares, but at least what you do is that you break this one big monoculture into strips of, and it can even be just two different crops, that you have a strip of maize and then a strip of pumpkin in between, and then maize and pumpkin.
And the next year you have to change that? I mean, if stroke one...
Ideally you would, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or even better, just a completely different crop. You would do crop rotation.
Okay.
Yeah. But in any case, so you have these two different crops, and then there's a certain trade-off. So of course, the smaller the strip, like if the width of one strip would be 2 meters, and then 2 meters you have something else, and then again, it would increase biodiversity a lot, and not just by the factor of 2, but really a lot. And then because the ideal scenario would be you have it completely mixed. But then there would be one plant and another plant next to it. So the closer you get to this, the more biodiversity would have, and the better for the soil and everything. But that is not possible with machines. So you need to get a pragmatic solution. And what they tried, also in Wageningen, there's a lot of research done on this, to try different width of these strips and what would it mean to biodiversity and also the soil.
So it's biodiverse, more biodiverse, and without loss of output.
Yeah, exactly. So to answer your question, in the end, you would, if it is done in the most optimal way, like most informed way as we can do at the moment, is you wouldn't lose area because you use just exactly the same area. And in addition, even the most, and this is also what we're working on in Wageningen, is that you choose partners that are actually beneficial to each other. Because you can also have competing plants that would compete for, let's say, the same nutrients or even if you have, that is actually, you can envision that very well. If you have the maize and in between the wheat, that the wheat will have a very hard time because it has the same architecture and it would compete with light, whereas the pumpkin is a completely different story because it crawls around on the floor, so it can even use the space between the maize very efficiently. And they would even, you could even have more yield than if you have the monoculture.
Because they share the plant.
Exactly. So there's this very nice example of the three sisters, which, and this is the thing, this is such old story. So it's totally nothing new what we are doing, but we need to adjust it in the well informed with a new setting with what we know and how you can adapt it. And so what the three sisters is actually that you plant a maize plant in the center, which is basically, let's say, the strong column. And then you plant a bean, and the bean is the nitrogen fixator, which actually then fertilizes the maize and can climb on the maize because on its own it cannot climb. And then you put the pumpkin that covers the ground. And with these three, you have a much higher yield as if you would have these three in monoculture. So it does not actually at all mean that you have less yield. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice story. And how difficult is it then to bring this story to Dutch farmers? Or do you see that we need a new generation of farmers to embrace these new ways of growing crops and applying the three sister principles?
Yeah, so this is a tricky question actually, and this is more social science actually, because it is so much of, as a farmer, so much more is also the social dimension, as I was saying before already. So it also depends a lot actually on your personality as a farmer. How much are you willing to experiment or to do something? I mean, if you have your fields and you have your machines and you perfectly know, okay, every March 15th I plant my wheat, and then 15 days later, I do the first fertilization, you just know. And even though you know that, okay, if it for 3 weeks it doesn't rain, you're super stressed, but you just, at least with what you do, you know, and you try your best. But then to switch to something completely new, whatever completely new means, but if it's just a completely a crop that you have never worked with, where do you get the knowledge from, you know? I mean, seed companies provide it, but they're also in their own interest a bit because they sell you all the stuff that's needed with it as well. But so it's really also, first of all, where would they get the knowledge from? And a lot is also peers. So you look around, what do the farmers next to you? But if they all do the same, then again, so it's that, so this willingness to explore and courage as well, really. And then also, so that comes with age in that sense. To answer your question, should we rather count on the next generation? I think this is just with age, you are intrinsically not so likely to try new things.
Is it part then of the curriculum of like new landbouwopleidingen?
Yeah.
Agriculture education that we have in the Netherlands? Is this the whole new permacultuur, biodiversity,
definitely. So
regenerative farming?
I can only speak of Wageningen, but yeah, it's definitely there. It's definitely there. And again, I want to stress the point. I first of all, I don't think we should wait for the next generation because then the train has left. But it's also, I really think that there are certainly farmers who are willing to do it, but it's just what we need to do is we need to help them to do it, actually. And the ones that are transitioning, engage with them and see what were their hurdles actually and how did they overcome it. Mm-hmm. And to really, because what is unfortunately happens too often, still often enough, that we think what is the solution and we go about it, but then is that actually what farmers need? Or is it just that they would need a bean that actually grows on their soil, you know? Or, yeah, things like this. I'm just making up things, but that you actually go to the needs of what would help them to change what they're doing. Because I really don't think it's the willingness that would be the hurdle.
Yeah.
I often read about precision agriculture as one of the next to crop diversification, as one of the potential solutions to monoculture. The downside of monoculture. Mm-hmm. Do you believe in that, or is that science fiction? I always think of this is shooting at clouds, and as a result, they only waterfalls on your soil. But I mean, we'll probably are much further than that. But can you elaborate?
So I think there are many solutions, like many things that need to change in many ways to change. And there is, in principle, I think there are these two ways. I don't know if you ever heard about The Wizard and the Prophet, but it's this. Okay, I love this book. But just to use this analogy, the wizard is basically the high-tech solutions. And this is, again, also what Wageningen is doing a lot. And all this precision, like that you really monitor the soil very well. You have all the sensors everywhere. You know where. So then you could also make irrigation much more precise, because this is a lot what's at stake in the south of Europe. That is just too dry. But at the moment, it's just irrigated, but also plants that would not need it at the moment. So you could make that much more efficient. Same with fertilization. Same with pesticides, herbicides. If you would actually only give it there where it's needed. But I think this is only very one way that would help. And this is really not a solution that can be globally applied. I mean, this is, again, we are speaking about the Netherlands. We are rich here and we could do this. So envisioning that this is a solution, I find it from such a luxury position put. Okay. Yep. And to have the other side there, the profit would then be rather we fundamentally need to change. It sounds big, but we need to change the system in the sense you can have all these tech solutions, but it will just give us a minute of breathing. But then if we go on like we did, we reach the plateau again, and then we need another solution. Yep. So it's rather that we how I see it, that we use this tech solution to get time to get the whole system changed. But this is also actually same with renewable energy. Yeah, that the energy that we use, we try to have as much renewable as possible. But if we increase with the energy that we use, then we reach a plateau again. And we will never get rid of fossil fuels. Yeah.
Talking about changing a system, this is a very philosophical question. So if you say bullshit, just say it. But there's a discussion now whether or not we should give nature rights, just like companies, which some people find very strange. But I mean, a company is something very abstract as well, and nature isn't abstract. So, what's your stance in this discussion? Do you think it would help, for instance, to protect loss of biodiversity?
Yeah, I think these different ways of how human beings see themselves in relation to nature, like there are these 4 different ways, but basically what it is too much. No, so people see themselves either as we are humankind and nature is there, and if I want to take a walk, I go into nature and then I go back home again, and so nature is decoration. Yeah. And then the other one is that you see that nature is important because it actually enables us to live. So you see the use of nature other than only decoration. And then it goes, you always, there are these different steps to go closer. So the other one is coexisting. So we are here and nature is here, and nature needs its space and we need our space. And then the more you go on, the more it is integrated, that you actually see, hello, as human beings, we are just one part of nature and not the other way around, right? And it's not that,
but that awareness is grown, right? Or I have the feeling that awareness that we are coexisting, like you say, I mean, next to nature, that awareness is growing?
I don't know. I feel like in our bubble, I don't know about your bubble, in my bubble, I would feel so. But then I feel like actually we lost it a lot, right? I mean, it's the time scale, of course, that we are talking about, but I feel it was much more there before. It is because we sit in this human created surrounding where you can be so abstract, you get your food in the supermarket, done. You don't even need to know where it comes
Milk
from.
It doesn't come from a cow, but from the supermarket. Okay.
Indeed. And so I think we are just too alienated already, and we are not the worst off in the Netherlands, I think, even though the level is quite high. But if you go to the US, I think it can be even worse. But I think that's why, because we are so alienated and because there's such a distance, in that sense, it might serve giving nature rights, that it might serve the purpose that he could actually defend itself, that it is part of the equation. And I think it comes back to true pricing, right? If we, the price that we pay right now for... a banana. I don't know what. Yeah. A banana is not the true price, because it is, if it's not a fair trade. Exactly. And if in that sense, if nature rights would enable us to put nature into the equation and for companies to defend why it has to have this price, then yes, then it would make sense. But what I find, practically speaking, now very tricky, what are nature's rights? I mean, how do I know what nature's needs are? I think, in my opinion, nature's needs are like, get rid of human beings, literally. That would just, so then us as human beings, we give the rights to nature. Yeah, nice,
That's a total different scenario. Okay, but
it was a philosophical question. Yeah.
I have one final question, and then maybe I'll let you have one.
So you can decide if it's a final.
I don't know. It's my final question. I didn't want to decide for you, but it's my final question. And maybe you can linger on your final question. Is it the time that you
prepare coffee now?
No, just wondering what's your view on. I read somewhere yesterday that globally 50% of land of the land that is available to use is used for agriculture. I'm not sure how that exactly plays out in the Netherlands. But do you think, should we strive for making less intense use of land for agriculture to bring that percentage down? So to say, hey, can't we do exactly what we do now, but then with less land?
It's a debate in the Netherlands as well. I mean, some people say there's a lot of land used only for cows who are in it for 3 hours a day.
Yeah, you get into the tricky question, of course, with now using a lot of land for cattle, for koeien, for cow, and etc. But without diving too much into that discussion, do you think we could do off with less land for agriculture purpose?
Less land for agricultural purpose. Yeah, I need to put it there now. The land sparing versus land sharing. So it is. What would you do with if you make agriculture more intense, and in that sense you would use less land for agriculture, what do you do with the rest? Because if you put buildings on it, that's one thing. But if the aim is to give it back to nature, that would be then land sparing, that whatever you use the land for, and this is literally what we extract as human beings, what we literally just use the land, and the rest you leave it to nature. But what the other way could be land sharing, that is that you do exactly the opposite, you intensify, so that you have then, for example, where the cattle are, but you also put trees there and you put less cattle there, so they just walk around, or it can be sheep, it can be anything. You put trees there, you put bushes there, you put berries there, you let people walk. So it's recreational space, but it is also space where food is produced. So in that sense, and it's the same area. So, but it's shared. But then, so the questions are really, what do you do if you make it more intense? So that land where agriculture is then used more intensely is really completely degraded in that sense. It's completely extracted and it's used as a slave. And then kind of make this clear cut, and the rest we make a national park, and no human being would ever put a foot on it. Yeah, but if that is 3 square kilometers, there's no gain. So I think it is really a balance, and it also very, very much depends on the context, because if you would do plug and paste that to Africa, where we have a completely different situation of soils, where soils are so nutrient poor, you cannot, this land sharing, land sparing is nicely said, but if you want to have more yield from that area, you need to put in more fertilizer. And this is a completely different story in the Netherlands. We cannot even put more fertilizer. So I think here, in making it even more intense, I think it's hardly possible, but it's rather to actually change and see it also as a different way, that you can also use this as recreational space and use it in different ways. Use is again not...
Is it then something like what we call the voedselbos?
Precies, something like this, yeah.
We spoke to Tim van Hattem, who was working at Wageningen University as well. You know, probably, okay. What's it called? Plan NL
2120. So it's a new map of the Netherlands, where also I think nature, agriculture, living, everything has a different... It's more in balance. Mm-hmm. There's more space also for nature. Okay. But that was my last question. Now,
my final question is about a totally different subject. I read in your LinkedIn profile, I guess, or I just heard it. No, I heard it from Marloes. You are one of the founders of the Klimaathelpdesk, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell something more about that?
Yeah. So the Klimaathelpdesk is actually something that arose from the Fridays for Future protests back in the days, like 3 years ago, where the kids were striking on Fridays on the street, and it was about climate change, really, and also about what happens to their future if we go on like this. But then it was very easy to say, the stupid kids are striking there and they have no clue what they're talking about. Yeah. But we, sitting at university as climate scientists or other scientists, we know that actually this is absolutely true what they are talking about, but nobody believes them, or it's very easy to just kick them away. So what we said, actually, what we can do is we can provide the facts to them and show that this is true what they're saying. So actually, this is how we started with the pledge at university, actually. And
so it's not making them scared. What you sometimes hear that people say, okay, we are making kids scared of the future, we should not do it. But it's more a sort of confirmation of what they are
that this is true what they're saying. Yeah. And also then we also realized, us as scientists, again, we are sitting there with our knowledge all nice and great, but does it actually get out there? And actually we totally owe it to the general public. They are the ones paying us. And it's not, even if we say, the knowledge is open out there, it's open access. Yeah, but honestly, who reads these papers? Like, you cannot. And then that was the point that we said, this is actually our duty to inform the general public.
Giving back.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. It is our duty, because we do know what's there. But it is our duty to inform people. It is the same as if you're a doctor and you know smoking is bad. You need to tell this person that this is at least what are you running into. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. This is really, but at least that people do take informed decisions, and why certain things might be necessary, that there comes a carbon tax or something, whatever it implies in the end. But that was actually the initial spark. And then what we decided, okay, how do you do this? Is that we set up a website, a platform with a very big button, put any climate-related questions, whatever relates
targeted at youth.
Exactly, because this is really where we also wanted to give the knowledge, because they don't get it taught at school, because their teachers didn't get it taught. So it's just a lack of information there, and students or young kids, they don't read the newspapers, and where they get the information from is a lot social media, easy, quick and read, and it's very easy to get wrong information then. And so this is actually, we got the cutest questions from kids. It's really, for one question was, for example, that came in is, I see the people striking in the street, but who pays them? So it's really, and what we learned with it, or one other one also, ik houd van kaas, but which one is then the cheese that I could still eat, you know? Yeah. So questions like this, and what we thought, so I'm also not a climate scientist, I'm a biologist, but the thing is, I can walk down the corridor and I can ask the person who actually knows the answer to this. And it's also, and then it's of course the task to break it down that actually people can understand it. Yeah. And then also in a scientific way to have a peer review, that you go to an independent expert that also revises it. That this is really, and that's the answer that then goes to the website. But what we found along this process is really with such a complex thing like climate change, and the same actually with biodiversity loss. It's so complex and touches upon so many areas, exactly with the question like who pays the people who strike on the street. It's politics is involved. When you sit there and you think, whom do I ask for it? And then you see how many domains are actually really involved in this, and that we really need to work together. And this is actually the beautiful thing of it, and to see.
But this is what you do next to your normal work?
Yes. I
can imagine it takes it can take a lot of work, right? I mean, if it gets popular, and it will be after this talk, right? I mean, the questions will all over the place, right? Seriously,
Yes, and to give you a very serious answer, we all do it voluntarily. None of us gets paid. We only have 2 student assistants that work 1 day a week we have 30 volunteers that keep the community together and streamline the communication with the experts. And it's a lot of behind the scene work, but it's...
Because how many questions, just a sort of idea, how many questions get into the...
Yeah, so we are there now for 3 years, and we have 220 questions already published and answered. And where I need to say, like, one question takes approximately 3 to 4 months until we get it answered, because it's also, from the experts, it's also their free time.
Yeah, so and you're a scientist, right? So you want to really think it over.
Of course, you need to do it properly, and it needs to happen in the evenings, right? And you need to bother people to do this. So it takes time. It takes really a lot of time, and it's much more than only publishing these answers, but really a lot of outreach activities. So we were at the Trouw Duurzame 100 3 times that we got nominated.
But how did you make sure that kids really read it? I mean, you just said, kids don't read lots of stuff. So if your answer is, that's good. Probably it's not gray and white. So
exactly. So that's also the point.
It's sort of gray then.
Yeah. So it is a very good example is actually the one. What is better, to use a recycled paper cup or a coffee cup that you wash?
We had a question as well in our canteen, right? I mean.
Yeah. So we have the answer on the website.
And it is.
You're going to read the answer on the website.
We check it out. It's all published, so it all stays
absolutely,
there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming over. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for being here.
Tot de volgende.
Marloes, de disclaimer.
Ja, zoals altijd. Alles wat wij of onze gasten zeggen zijn hun eigen en onze eigen meningen en standpunten en niet die van BNP Paribas.